So you've said that climate change is real, but it's not the end of the world, and it's not even our most serious environmental problem.
Right.
Why do you think that this moderate way of expression is so rare in our mainstream media?
Well, I actually think that's where we're headed. I mean, I think we are coming towards a more moderate version of climate policy, at least, starting in the United States, and we're starting to see it, I think, around the world. But the media thrives on fear. It sells newspapers. I think fear and anger and negative emotions are central to what journalists are trying to do. I also just think that secular people need their own apocalypse, and climate change or climatism provides an overarching religious framework for people. People used to try to get right by God and follow God's rules. Now they want to follow the rules set by climate scientists and environmental activists. It's a totalizing religion. Climate activists are always trying to mess with the foods you eat, the clothes you wear. They want to get involved in therapy. There's like a whole climate anxiety and a need for climate therapy. So it's really intrusive. It's very aggressive. It's very puritanical. And so I think that the people that go into media, people in media tend to be more narcissistic. And so we see a lot of narcissism in the climate change movement.
As I read your life, it has you had the image that when you were younger, you were more like a green activist, and now maybe you have a more skeptical view. What was the turning point? Or when was the turning point?
I mean, I was an environmental activist as a young man. When I was 15, I held a party for saving rainforests, and I was very concerned about climate change. I was never Malthusian, so I never believed that there were too many people. I always thought the people preaching Malthusianism it was sort of vaguely racist. I was more of a socialist, more of an environmental socialist. And what really changed my mind is when I discovered that nuclear energy was good and necessary. And then once you realize that you can solve climate change with nuclear power, and that almost every climate activist is against nuclear power, you have to ask yourself, what's really going on here? Why is that? Like, why would they oppose? And not only they're against nuclear power, they're against natural gas. Well, those are the two biggest, technologies in terms of reducing emissions. So obviously you don't care. Reducing emissions can't be your top priority. Otherwise you'd be very in favor of nuclear and natural gas. So why is that? And what you discover is that there's a mix of political, social, financial, psychological, existential reasons why. These are people often that are very sort of insecure socially. They're looking for a way to assert themselves. I think Europe itself has been insecure about its role in the world. Its security is provided by the United States. European countries used to be colonial powers. Now they're basically struggling to, manage their own countries. They feel very guilty. And so climate change serves a bunch of interests. And so they want to keep it going as an issue. They don't want to solve it. If they wanted to solve it, then everybody would have just done what France did, which is to build a lot of nuclear power plants.
And we reading in the news that Germany is about to reopen the nuclear plants.
It is?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yes, Merz said that they would like to do so.
Who said that?
Friedrich Merz.
Oh, Merz said that. Wow.
Yeah. Not Scholz, but
yeah.
What we can see.
When did he say that? Just now?
3 months ago.
Oh, okay.
When he got elected.
Okay.
But we know that the politicians
yeah.
can say big things and then do nothing. But we will see for sure. What I can see, I'm 21 years old, that my generation is like at total fear. They has like social anxiety, eco anxiety, and everything, environmental anxiety. Why do you think that the mainstream media wants us to fear? Therefore, our lives will be like meaningless, and living in constant fear is like living in a nightmare.
Right.
Why do you think it's important for them?
Because they want to control you. Yeah. They want to control the decisions you make. They want to control who you vote for. They want you to spend a lot of money on energy. I mean, there's a big, powerful financial interest that make a lot of money in making energy expensive, and that's what they've done. So it's a manipulation. I think the Generation Z hopefully will see through that. The millennials and the Gen Xers were all very manipulated by this. I think Gen Z, we've seen the young men becoming, in particular, much stronger, more masculine. So I think there's an opportunity there to reject this. It's an effort to control you, and that what we should want is prosperity and freedom, and they're delivering the opposite: poverty and enslavement.
Yes, and Greta Thunberg said that I want you to panic.
Yes.
And Greta Thunberg is as old as I am, and I was thinking that she knows what she's doing.
At some level she knows. I mean, remember, she's somebody that said very early that she had and her mother said she has psychiatric, disorders. I think she says she's Asperger's. I think we say autism spectrum. She may also have a personality disorder, like histrionic or some, cluster B, personality disorder. So she's a disordered person. She's somebody that, really doesn't have much of a moral compass, is just really concerned about doing things that gain more attention for her, which is consistent with narcissism. So I think she's now focused on Gaza.
Yeah.
So, she said that climate change was an existential issue that would destroy the planet, that we're all going to die. What happened to that? So she's just moving on, to issue by issue. And I think she's lost a lot of trust, actually, that she had in doing that, because I think you just don't believe that she was really the person that she said she was.
Some narratives suggest young people not to have children because they produce more CO2, things like that. Is it a real threat?
If we don't have people, then we have nothing. I mean, so are we going extinct is the question. I mean, are we voluntarily, making ourselves extinct? In the West, that's definitely happening. I mean, it's really shocking, and neither the left nor the right have a solution to it. The best solution I can imagine is that we need to communicate that life is beautiful and that it's wonderful. Having children is often one of the most important things that people do. Certainly, as you get older, you appreciate your children so much. They become very important to you along with your grandkids. But we put too much pressure on parents to be the best parents. I don't think people need to be the best parents. They need to be good parents, fine parents, but there's too much pressure on people. And then the stories that we've told about the climate apocalypse, I think all that's contributed to the decline of the birth rate and declining fertility. So, I think it's a big problem. And I'm not sure that anybody's quite figured out how to solve it.
Yeah, sadly. And who is behind it? I mean, we're communicating that you shouldn't have children, but you should invite migrants or increase immigration.
Right.
So who is behind it? Because it's hard to figure it out.
Well, at first there was the Malthusians. It was people that were, openly enthralled with this anti-human ideology, which really, Malthus is this economist, this British economist, whose most famous book is in the very late 1700s, and everything he said was wrong at the time. It's proven to be wrong over and over. Humans are very good at producing enough food and resources for ourselves as we grow in population. I think it comes from somewhere much deeper, which is it comes from a kind of envy, a resentment. These are often pretty small people they feel small, they feel insecure, they're looking for some way to feel, more powerful, and they do that by trying to put everybody down. I mean, if you're anti-human, it's sort of insulting everybody around you. And the narcissism is that you sort of exclude yourself from that condemnation.
You started in your book, or you stated that sometimes green activists can act, and on the following days, everyone says that you are an idiot. So basically, sometimes when they act, they make enemies. Mm-hmm. Why are they doing this? They are believing in it, or what?
Yeah, I mean, they're in the grip of a dogmatic religion, and this is we've seen this since the French Revolution. People that think they're not religious end up becoming religious. So you see the French Revolution, communism, and wokeism, of which you should include climatism. These are secular responses to the human condition. The human condition is that we're unusual from every other living being on earth, and that we have an awareness of our own deaths. And that creates an enormous amount of anxiety in people, not just because they fear the death, but because they know that that you're limited by your choices. So there's a lot of pressure on young people, much more pressure than there used to be in the past. My grandfather had a choice between 2 or 3 women he could marry. He could work at the feed store or be a farmer. There was no question that he would be raised as a Christian or that he would be a male of the species. All of those things have now been opened up for young people. And so there's an enormous amount of anxiety. And that anxiety creates people that need simple answers about how to live their lives. And climatism offers that answer in a way that religion used to offer it in the past. Climatism offers it now. The problem is it's so destructive, and the people that are in the grip of it, they don't think they're being destructive. They think that they're saving the world. And so they're particularly blind to how off-putting they are and how offensive they are. They're really wrapped up in this dream world of themselves as these heroes helping to usher in a completely renewable net zero society.
Every ideology or this kind of religion has golden ages.
Yes.
Fascism has golden age before the Second World War. Communism has after the Second World War. Are we over? Are we after the golden age of climatism?
I think climatism is definitely dying off. Could it make a comeback? I suppose so. The problem is that we've seen too much of the effects of it, creating anxiety and depression, irrational behaviors like shutting down nuclear plants and deindustrialization. It's sort of a death cult. I mean, it's really a suicidal religion. It's attacking the foundation of society, which is cheap energy. So I think it's going away. I'm a little concerned, though, that I'm not sure we've seen the real return of the West. In the United States, people voted for Trump, but in part just the Democrats just governed so badly. I mean, they just let so many people in through the border. It's not clear that the United States, that has embraced a kind of pro-West, pro-American vision. That used to be pretty obvious. Cheap energy, law and order, equal justice under the law, non-discrimination. These were all things that people believed in, and those have all been attacked by the left over the last 30 years with increasing success. And so, I think we're in a really existential moment for not just for the West, but for the human species in general.
So let's continue with the woke ideology. In Hungary or in Eastern Europe, let's say, the influence of wokeism or gender ideology is relatively small or minimal. How should we try? It's hard to imagine that how could this ideology can affect people or become a mainstream ideology. How did it happen in the USA?
Well, I think it really goes back. I mean, you have to trace it back to, like I was saying, the French Revolution, communism. It's really after communism is discredited in the late 1980s and early 90s that you start to see the birth of political correctness, is what it's first called. It's really the radical left from the 60s, they called it the new left, political correctness, and it's really an intensification of that all the way through. And so what happens is that the universities are the first places that are really taken over by this radical ideology. They then indoctrinate their students over many decades, Generation X, then millennials. And then you get the rise of social media that allows for the formation of mobs and cancel culture and the rising intolerance. I think all those forces have come together. This particular behavior, this intolerance, it's very reminiscent of totalitarianism under communism and the French Revolution. So it's clearly addressing some need that humans have. I think it's clearly recognizing a need for religion.
As I see, at the beginning of the woke ideology, the conservative side or on the right side maybe has had disadvantages, or the woke had like advantages in cultural side. Why did the conservatives were so passive in this at the start of this cultural war?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think, conservatism, I mean, it's not like, liberalism is active. It's progressive. It's trying to change things. It's trying to expand the government. It's creating more laws. Conservatism is cautious. It's worried about unintended consequences, tends to be oriented towards the family, towards local government, not towards supranational governments, the global governments, World Economic Forum, UN. Those are all viewed critically by the right. I think the right also everywhere is a bit more rural, a little bit less college educated. It's less elite. I think it's less assertive. It's less dogmatic. And so it puts it at a disadvantage. I had a university professor explain that, you have a kind of, even a liberal professor at a university in the 60s, you might hire a radical left professor, you might hire a conservative professor, but from a game theoretic perspective, once the radical left professor is in power, they're only hiring other radical leftists. So you get a purifying function to the university that accumulates over time so that you eventually drive out both conservatives and traditional liberals, and they end up reproducing and recreating themselves. And then those universities then, of course, train the elites of society, the journalists, the professionals, the people that work in government. And so I think conservatives they just had no idea what was really going on. And, they were also complacent because they did have a lot of success politically under Reagan and under, George W. Bush, at least for a while. So I think they felt like they were in touch with the public. But then wokeism came and look, a lot of conservatives just embraced big parts of it rather than putting up resistance. And in fact, it took former leftists, including people like Chris Rufo and Peter Boghossian and Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, all of whom were on the left, Donald Trump, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard. These were all leftists who actually have done so much of the work of standing up to the right, in part because I think they still have that liberal personality that I think is not intuitive to conservative people.
Yes, and as I see, for example, Jordan B. Peterson, he seems like that he didn't change that much. The word changed, or the liberalism changed, and that's how he became a conservative or something like that. Do you think that, like, the conservative side is able now? Are they able to fight the mainstream media because they like built up an alternative media with like Daily Wire, PragerU, and things like that? So are they in a fight nowadays?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that I think there's a lot of us that were on the left that felt like that the left became really extreme and very radical and moved away from us. And I think that's true. I think that the other thing, though, that a lot of us understood is that underneath liberal democratic society is a whole set of what you might consider conservative values. So to have a society of law and order, democracy, free speech, all these things, you have to have a bedrock, a foundation that values work, that thinks that people should have to work to earn a living, and that there's an idea of honest work. Most people have to want to obey laws. You have to believe in the government. You have to believe in laws. You have to be against corruption. Those are not values in a lot of other countries in the world. And those are not laws. Those are values. And they sit underneath liberal democratic civilization that sits on top of it. I think a lot of us realized that for the first time. We started reading people like Thomas Sowell, who's a very important American conservative, and it started making sense to us that actually liberalism is a kind of privilege afforded by conservatism. And, Hobbes before Locke. And so you have a sense in which I think people that were on the left saw the left get very extreme and started asking questions about what was the right and what is conservatism, in realizing that it's not something foreign or other, that it's often something that all of our stuff rests upon. If you hadn't had conservative people conserving these values that are 2,500 years old and conserving them over 2,500 years and bringing them forward, we wouldn't have all this prosperity and freedom. So I think that's just to answer the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, yeah, I mean, the right-wing infrastructure now is much more impressive than it was. Really from 2004 to maybe 2015, the left infrastructure was much superior. They had the Center for American Progress, Media Matters. And then you have a technological revolution. You know, you have a podcasting revolution. Joe Rogan becomes the most important platform. You know, he's not just a podcaster, he's a platform, which means that he can platform people and platform voices that would have been excluded from the mainstream conversation until recently. Similarly with Substack, you can get information, accurate information that you just can't get from the New York Times. And then, of course, X and Twitter, being the most important social media platform for politics in the world, had a massive impact in changing that. So that's allowed the right, there's a sense in which the left talks about, you know, the right wing as having this podcast dominance, but the left controls everything else. I mean, the left controls the universities, they control the media, they control most branches of the government. The right has sort of been able to find a little bit of power thanks to Donald Trump and thanks to the social media technological revolution, but I think that the right still remains a minority force in a lot of Western nations, including Hungary.
Last question. How can we identify or recognize woke if it appears in Hungary, or if someone, I don't know, from Brussels or Washington tries to force to us this ideology? How can we recognize or identify it?
Well, I mean, I think most people know the telltale signs. The woke religion is anti-civilization, it's anti-Western civilization, it's anti-nation state, it's anti-American, it's against European nations. It views them as evil, founded on indigenous genocide, founded on slavery, founded on the oppression of women and sexual minorities. I think that's all very obvious. I think the mistake is to want to censor it, to ban it, to have speech codes, to disallow an LGBT march. I think the right should never get itself on the wrong side of that freedom issue. It'll only backfire. It may deliver some short-term responses, but long-term it's a really bad idea. So I think that's where the right needs to evolve to, is you need the left to be crazy and to say crazy things. I mean, the irony of this all is that Donald Trump might not be president had the left not tried to censor him and put him in jail. And so the left's downfall was its own creation. It's a classic, tragic narrative where somebody who's very proud of their past achievements on civil rights or sexual freedoms or race relations, all of these things then become a source of pride, and then the left tries to push them too far, arrogantly ignoring social realities and the human costs, environmental costs of it, and they end up creating support for the thing that they most oppose, in this case, Trump.
Our time is up, so thanks a lot for being available for us.
Thanks for having me.